Hello, Eleanor Beaton here, and welcome back to another episode of the Woman-Owned Podcast. I was having a conversation recently with a really successful founder in our ecosystem, in the Safi ecosystem. We happened to run into each other at a conference I was speaking at, and we were both kind of attending that was related to venture capital and the startup ecosystem. And one of the things that we were talking about was the difference between growing a business that is in startup versus growing a business that is established. And one of the core differences we were talking about is that early growth is an expansion game, but sustainable growth is a curation game. And in this episode, I'm going to take 10 or 15 minutes to walk you through the difference between expansion and curation and why, if you are an established business, approaching growth from a curation lens is going to be one of the most sustainable things you can do to drive not only income growth, but the enterprise value of your business. Don't go anywhere. All right. So I was recently advising a founder, and this is a founder who is doing between 500,000 and $1 million in revenue. She is an established business owner. And the interesting thing is that for her, the challenge of growth isn't so much about like the opportunities that she needed to find or the new tactics and new strategies she needed to deploy. It actually wasn't about that. The challenge for her is deciding which opportunities, either new opportunities or existing things that are happening in her business, which opportunities no longer deserve a yes. This, my friends, is the subtle and refined art of curation. And for many of you who are listening to this show, success in your business, taking your business to the next level, and quite honestly, taking your life to the next level has much more to do with curation than with expansion. So let's talk about expansion. So expansion is really about adding things. So when I talk about expansion, I'm talking about addition, adding things. And the reality is that expansion built the business. And so when you were in startup mode, you've got to add things because you're starting from zero. And so you are adding more clients. You may be adding more offers. You may be adding more people. You may be adding more partnerships. You may be adding more experiments. You may be adding more visibility channels. Like initially in growth, it is very much about addition. And that's kind of the nature of growth. Growth in the natural world, it produces an overabundance. This is why a farmer who has an apple orchard is going to spend a lot of her time pruning the apple trees so that they produce more fruit. A gardener is going to spend her time weeding the garden so that the plants in her garden can produce more fruit and vegetable. So overabundance, that addition, is how things get started. And when it comes to really harvesting the act, it's going to be all about refining. Expansion is what builds the business. And when you are building the business, you need to create that expansion muscle. And I mean, the other part of this, of course, is that you can't curate something that doesn't exist. So you need to have a body of work, a volume of a client base, some offers under your belt in order to figure out what needs to be curated or pruned. But this is the interesting thing. At a certain point, your business is going to shift from being in the expansion game to being in the curation game. And it is your job as a leader to identify when that shift is ready to happen and then to become much more intentional about what you say yes to, and probably to clear out some debris and to start cleaning down the decks in the business. So successful founders often want to continue using the same muscle that got them from A to B. They want to keep using that muscle to get them from B to C. And so what they will often do is start adding more. And I've seen this over and over. In fact, I was recently working with an operator, really successful operator, who she was adding more and more. And that's the thing that actually started to cause her revenue to go down. It was through too much adding. And so for her, it was really about pruning back. Because the result is, if you keep adding more and you keep flexing that muscle, you've got too many offers, too many priorities, too many different types of clients, too many initiatives, too many decisions. So what can happen here is that the business can grow, or it can feel like it's growing, but the quality of the business actually declines. And so, for example, I have seen businesses where the overall client count or customer count has gone up, the profitability has gone down because they haven't been able to grow profitably. And they've actually had to prune and cut and curate in order to create that kind of profitable growth. So I think the idea here is that expansion creates that bed of opportunity. Curation is what creates enterprise value, a business that is truly and inherently valuable and is an asset that is transferable. And that is what, as an entrepreneur, you want to create. So let's talk about the sophisticated founder's job. So as you move from startup to scale up, your job as a founder is to start thinking increasingly about curation. And so a lot of the operators that are coming into our ecosystem, they often are coming in worried that it's going to be more work. And in general, it's because there is a strong bias to additive growth. Whereas what's more common is that a founder is going to subtract to multiply. So when we're working with an established founder, what we are generally looking at is a big focus on curation. And curation is going to be deciding what not to sell, deciding who not to serve, deciding which opportunities don't fit, and deciding what no longer belongs. And what I see over and over is that in general, founders at $500,000, $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, she doesn't need more ideas. And in fact, curriculum and more ideas can tank the business. What she actually needs is stronger filters. To be clear, the founders I work with rarely have opportunity problems. They have curation problems. And the biggest gift that they can give themselves is a curation lens. So they start refining. It's like Michelangelo who talked about all he had to do was chip away the marble that wasn't David. And very often for many of you, that's the truth of your businesses. You simply need to chip away what isn't inherent to the business to create something that is compact, that is light, that is durable, that is simple, and that is very valuable. So last week's episode, we talked about inherited ambition versus sophisticated ambition. And inherited ambition always asks the question, how do I get bigger? And by the way, if you haven't listened to that episode, I suggest you go back and listen to it. Sophisticated ambition always asks, what deserves to remain? Early growth is an expansion game. Sustainable growth is a curation game. So I encourage you to take some time to look at the overall architecture of your business and ask yourself, what could I release from this model, from these marketing habits, from these channels, from this client base? What could I release that would leave the business even stronger, even more profitable, more curated, and more potent than it was before? Thanks so much for being here. If you found value from this episode, send it to a woman operator you respect, and we'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Woman Owned Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. If you found value in what I shared, please go ahead and like this video, give it a thumbs up, and leave me a review or leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next week.